ETJ Writes here, and today we are finally going to be doing the long-awaited conclusion to the Wayfarer Redemption, which I have right here. So I finally finished this book, and I'm going to tell you all about what happens at the end of it. Last time we were at the battle for Gorkenfort, and now, well, obviously we got past that point. Some pretty interesting stuff happened. Namely, that they did win the day. Now, Axis was grievously injured, and so it was up to Faraday to heal him. So she used like the power of the mother or whatever and was able to heal him. Inadvertently, although she doesn't really care, kind of revealing how deep her feelings are for Axis in the process and making a greater enemy out of him to his brother Bornheld, who is currently married to Faraday, although again Faraday has decided she's not going to break her marriage vows, so good for her. I support that. Even if you're in love with somebody else, you know, you made a promise. While I would consider the Battle of Gorkenfort to be the conclusion to this story, it does have a little bit more to go. So some things that happen are the city is still under siege, and while the mountain ranges are being protected by the singing tree, the Icarii and the Avar have fled, and the Icarii went deep underground to these people called the Charonites, or the Caronites. It's obviously a reference to Charon or Charon, the Greek ferryman of Greek mythology, who ferries the souls of the dead, and there's more mythology to come with that in this series. The other thing that is really interesting is that because they're in the middle of this siege, they argue back and forth, the Icarii people saying, okay, should we go help Axis? Should we not go help Axis? At this point, it's been found out that Stardrifter, one of the Icarii, the winged people, is his father, and that his mother was married to Stardrifter, all that kind of stuff. So everybody knows all the secrets in the Icarii side. So they say, you know, we'll go meet with him. So they fly over to the fort, and Axis is like, hey, cool, we're gonna meet up. And so his cousin Freefall stands on the roof and is like talking to Axis, and they're like hugging and stuff, and Axis is like, I have parents, and he's super excited about it. And they're like, will you help us with the fighting? And before an answer can happen, Bornheld storms up and he's like, you filthy Icarii, and stabs Freefall through the heart. And of course Axis is like, oh man, you just killed my cousin, brother, I'm gonna kill you. I guess he's his half-brother, because they have the same mom. And Bornheld is like, to the dungeons with you, Axis. And so Axis goes off to the dungeons, but then Bornheld doesn't kill him right away because everybody loves Axis, and if he does, he's gonna have a full-scale riot on his hands. So Faraday and Belial, Axis second in command, and this other guy called Magris come up with this plan to get Axis out of there. They're like, hey, Bornheld, technically our city's still under siege, so what if Axis leads the party away from Gorkenfort? And Bornheld's like, yeah, he can do that because he's probably gonna die. We're all gonna die if we don't do something. And Faraday's like, but secretly, here, take this beautiful green dress that I wore like a couple times to go to this secret and mystical grove, and we're gonna cut it into strips so that only threads remain, and we're gonna tie a thread around everybody's single arms, and you've got to say, Mother, I trust in you, and then that's gonna keep you safe as you go off to defeat the Skreelings. So Bornheld doesn't know this plan. Axis is like, I'm gonna go off with my battle axes, here we go, la la la. And the fort commander Magris is like, and I'm gonna go too. And Bornheld's like, what? But that's what happens. So they all go off and buy them some time. And of course, Axis men don't die. They have like green emerald fires that rains down on the Skreelings and defeats them. And Faraday and everybody goes off, and Axis eventually goes to meet with his father. And it's a pretty good conclusion. It's not like a final epic battle, but it's after the battle, like the last few chapters feel like the epilogue. Throughout this book, we have been introduced to Timizel and the fact that he's probably being controlled by Gorgrel, but then there's this guy, the Dark Man, and I came up with this theory as I was reading through the book that, let me see here. I said, I think the Dark Man is pulling the strings. I think he may be the ninth enchanter, whose tomb Timizel had the vision in, and of whom the Icarii refused to speak. It's possible that he ascended through the Stargate and found a way to return. He certainly taught Gorgrel all that he knows. And so that was a little theory I had come up with, and as I'm reading through this book, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's what's really going on, because this prophecy is so weird. It's like, who would write this prophecy in such a way that you would write the return of the guy, but also the return of the ascension of the Starman who could defeat the Dark Man? But the more I read it, the more it seems like these two forces have been pitted against each other to, not for Gorgiel to win, but for somebody else to win. And came up with that theory in book 1. And I really enjoyed this book, and I'll read you a little bit of it in just a moment. But it was really fun. This scene doesn't really happen the way it says it happens. We've got, I think this is supposed to be Ogden and Vermund and all these people, but this doesn't happen. It's like, if this is supposed to be Faraday and this is supposed to be Timozel, then Faraday never had a sword, and that was super disappointing. If it's supposed to be Axis, then Axis was never at the Stargate at the same time that Faraday was at the Stargate. And then who are these people? We don't know, because they were never armed men down here. So that's kind of disappointing that this scene actually isn't in the book. However, dun dun dun, this one kind of is. Not 100%, but this is not Faraday. This is Azure, and this is Axis for sure, and she sewed this tunic for him, and they're in love and have 3 children. Well, they have 1, and then she's pregnant with 2 of his other kids. As you can see from my bookmark, I have gotten about 60% through, because I started reading the next book and it was just so fascinating that I read this like way faster. I mean, this one's taken me months to get through, I guess because I needed to learn the world and all this, but the writing is tighter in this, and I'm used to the style of the head hopping, and I know all the characters, and the intrigue is more interesting, and people are acting more independently, not just because of the prophecy, but because of things that are going on. So I've really been enjoying book 2, and since I've started the series, I'm definitely going to finish it. So really excited about that. I gotta get the next one. You see the whole jacket here. It's a really handsome book. And a lot of cool stuff has happened that has expanded on the mythology, as well as introduced some new elements. And we did find out about halfway through that my theory from book 1 was correct, but it's been expanded upon more and more and given us more mystery. So answered some questions while giving us some more. But like I said, I'm going to round off this video here by me reading a little bit of the Wayfarer's Way. Oh, and I just wanted to say what's interesting is we have this glossary at the end that is, let's see, 436 to 444, so it's just under 10 pages long. And the funny thing is, this is a thick book. This glossary is almost 10 pages long, but the world building was done so incredibly well that I personally did not need this glossary, because I understand everything. And I think that's what, when you have a good epic fantasy book, that if you were trying to just describe it to your average person, I mean, sure you could, but you really getting in deep into it, it's like, what are we talking about? There's all this lore mythology. It's like you're speaking a whole different language, but you understand it without even having to pick up this glossary. So I think that's neat. Like, the glossary's there for people who need it, but everything was explained so well throughout the story that I haven't even looked at it except for now to see how many pages it is. All right, but we have this last little bit. This is when Axis has been reunited, or is about to reunite, with his mother and father for the first time that he can remember. So, Axis' booted feet scrunched through the snow, and he threw his cloak back over his shoulders. He had been walking for some 10 minutes, the black rock of the cliffs now only 50 or so paces away, when the 5 Ikarii birdmen who had been watching his approach landed softly in the snow in front of him. Axis stopped. 2 he recognized, Hovereye and Spikefeather, but the other 3 he did not. 2 of them had the black wings that hover eye and spike feather sported, but like Freefall, the 5th had pure white wings, golden hair, and pale blue eyes. He wore no clothes over his upper body, and Axis could see that his torso bore the scars of a recent battle. Looking into his face, Axis could see reflections of his own. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something, but he could not find the words to say. He could not take his eyes from his father. Stardrifter slowly stepped forward, his eyes locked into those of his son. That this man was his son, Stardrifter had absolutely no doubt. The man's blood sang to him, called to him, screamed for him, and Stardrifter could feel his own blood calling back. Stardrifter's mouth thinned at the black uniform that the man wore, and his eyes glittered angrily. He stopped a pace from his son, and they both stood and stared at each other. Axe's eyes were filled with tears, but Stardrifter's were utterly dry. Slowly, hesitantly, Stardrifter reached out a hand and laid it flat on Axe's breast, feeling his son's heart beating frantically under his fingers. Then Stardrifter's fingers convulsively clutched into the black material of Axe's tunic, and with one vicious twist, he ripped the insignia of the crossed golden axes from his son's breast and hurled the piece of material away, to flutter unwanted across the icebound wastes at the foot of the ice-carp Alps. Stardrifter's anger faded as the hated emblem blew away. He hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced Axis, speaking the ritual words of greeting normally uttered only to a newborn baby. "Welcome, Axis, into the house of Sunsor, and into my heart. My name is Stardrifter Sunsor, and I am your father. Sing well, and fly high, then may nothing and no one tear your feet from the path of the Star Dance again." Axis wrapped his arms about his father and held him tight, the tears finally sliding free from his eyes. So there you have it. Maybe you didn't feel the emotion as much as I did, but when you sat with this whole book and read it and just experienced everything the characters have gone through, it's really great. I will say, I never ever bought into the love story of Faraday and Axis. It's very forced. I didn't like it. It's probably the weakest part of this whole thing. This whole story could have worked just as well, I think, without the love aspect. If they had just been like really, really good friends, I think it would have worked fine, particularly because there's a romance in this one. I told you these two are together, and it works so much better. Like, I buy that these two are in love. It's really great, and she's like this fierce warrior, and they kiss in the middle of battle, just so passionate and exciting and interesting. And like, if the author could write a romance like that, why didn't she write one here? And I really don't have any answers for you, but I kind of don't want Axis to end up with Faraday no matter what happens. But the interesting thing is, we think the prophecy means one thing in the story because that's what everybody who we come across has said. But then as we get into book 2, things start to change. And we start to realize that maybe the prophecy is more nuanced than we thought. Maybe the people named in it aren't the people we thought they were. Yes, Axis is the Starman. Yes, Gorgorel is the Destroyer. But what about everybody else? And then there's these beliefs that some people have that aren't even in the prophecy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I can say with certainty that I have very much enjoyed reading Wayfarer's Redemption, and that I'm enjoying the next book, and I will be looking forward to book 3. So until next time, happy reading!